There she go. Oh, oh, ooh, ooh. Ooh, ooh.
Hello there everyone, it's B, and since it's the dead of winter and it's getting really cold, and I bet that a lot of you are cuddling up at your fireplaces with a warm coffee or hot chocolate and a good book, I decided to make this video about the 10 books that, in my opinion, shaped who I am. It was very hard to make the list because I'm sure that there are so many more books that I have read that have impacted me a lot. These are the ones that I personally can come up with and remember. So if you want to, you can leave a comment down below and tell me what books you think shaped you as a human being. Let's get into my list and maybe you will find something that you will want to read this winter. I will go in a chronological order from early childhood to now, and the book I want to start with is Brothers Grimm Fairy Tales, and this is something that I legitimately grew up with. I was read these fairy tales all the time, and the originals, they all have very gloomy and bad endings. Obviously, when you read them to a kid, like, I didn't understand them back then, but now remembering them back as a grown-up, they have a completely different meaning, like most fairy tales do. Essentially, fairy tales aren't all rainbows and monkeys like they show it in Disney. Fairy tales are the meaning of life and death and all of these other underlying things. So I kind of really want to reread this, and it definitely developed my creativity and my fantasy and just generally my love towards literature. Another book that I read when I was a little bit older, which is from the same exact opera of having so many more meanings when you've grown up, is Alice in Wonderland. And I associated myself with Alice for so many years. Even my graduation dress in 9th grade was made after the dress, the blue dress that Alice was wearing. And back then it was just this world of beautiful fantasy and magic and surrealism. There's so much hidden symbolism in that book, and her character represents growing up and the brutality of growing up and facing the reality that you can't control, and in a lot of ways just being very lost in this fairy tale. So I mean, if you've not read Alice in Wonderland, read it. I want to reread it again because I read it such a long time ago that I can barely even remember. Antoine de Saint-Exupéry's The Little Prince. This is a book I read when I was about 6, and then I read it again when I was about 17, I think. Boy, how different it was in those two cases. In a sense, this book is similar to Alice in Wonderland in the themes of coming of age. This book has an iconic quote, which is, "All essential things are not visible to the eye," and by that it essentially teaches the morals of how all the most important things like love and friendship and compassion, they're all in the air, they're all within us. This book touched me so much when I was reading it in school, and I remember writing a really long essay after it that was a letter to my mother. I think I even cried when I was writing that essay because it was right at that age when you're kind of stepping into adulthood, and yeah, this book just meant a lot to me. The next 3 books are from the same series, and these are by Maurice Druon, and they are The Damned Kings, and it's a trilogy of books. In French, if I pronounce it correctly, it's Le Roi Maudit. And essentially these books are historical novels all about the French monarchs, so they're very interesting. But to me, these books that I read when I think I was about 13 or 12, and they're very grown up for that age, were what got me into reading historical fiction, and that has always been one of my favorite genres because I love to learn while reading a good story. Currently, I don't really read fiction at all, but after these books it just kind of snowballed. I started reading Notre Dame de Paris and The Three Musketeers and other stories of Dumas and just so many other books. I'd say this was a good beginning. And my favorite book was the first one, which was about Philip IV and his family, and the later 2 and 3, they go about the next generations of the kings. These books shaped me because they were the biggest challenge of my entire life. I was 15. And these are Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace, and these are 2 ridiculously fat books. The first edition of this book has 1,225 pages. It's tiny font, like you can see. They're very slowly written, but when I conquered these books, it was the biggest feeling of achievement I can ever remember from reading a book. Essentially, these, like other Leo Tolstoy's books, are about the Russian intelligentsia and about the war with Napoleon. And they kind of go in 2 parallels. There's war and there's peace, just like the name of it. These books follow an entire society and how it shapes and how the consciousness moves through it and how reality faces spirituality, because it comes at the very last breaths and the very last crossroads of the Tsarist Russia, and it's at the very edge of a society completely changing itself. So it's just very interesting. I definitely didn't enjoy them then as much as I know I would enjoy them now, but they are very special and they are a world literature classic for a reason. Next up that I don't have in a physical example is Edgar Allan Poe. Generally all his tales of horror and macabre and mystery. Edgar Allan Poe is someone who I fell in love with. He as a writer has an incredibly interesting story. I have shivers all over my body even talking about it. There was another author that we had to read in school for IB, and I honestly loved every single one of his works. The Raven, The Haunted Palace, The Pit and the Pendulum, The City and the Sea. So many of them, and I'm not gonna spoil anything. It's haunting. It's gonna make you think about every single one of them for days. So if you've not read Edgar Allan Poe, definitely do, especially if you love kind of creepy and mysterious poetry and novels. The next book is Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now, and when I read this really impacted me a lot. It really changed my perception of myself and of mindfulness, especially as a woman. I get lost so much in this everyday hustle, and this book just really teaches you to be present and to be happy about every smile you get, and even the wind that blows into your hair and all of these little things. And as cliche as that sounds, I really recommend reading it, and I know that I have to reread it again because it's something that you get in touch with and then you get out of touch with it after a while because you get carried away with the physical and everyday things. So definitely read The Power of Now. Another self-help book that I read while traveling is Osho's Maturity, and I've talked about Osho a million times. He's one of those authors that you can pick up any title that speaks to you or speaks to your ambitions or to just your general interests, and you just absorb all of this wisdom that he has. And maturity is just about generally growing up and becoming your own person. And I remember my favorite motive from that book that I talked about in a video of mine as well was about how you can grow horizontally or vertically, and horizontally you're growing in years and age, and vertically you're growing in wisdom. So essentially you can be 18 years old and really wise, or you can be old on the horizontal scale but still have the mind of a child, not really understand and value the things around you. And that book again teaches you mindfulness, and it's really incredible. And then the last two books, one of them is Franz Kafka's The Castle. This is the most absurd book I have ever read, and I have read a lot of absurd books. You get lost in it so much because it basically tells a story of society, and you can draw parallels with the village where the character Kay lives as being the earth and then the castle being the god. But it's essentially a story of the character who tries to do everything to get to the castle, to get to the top, but he never can and he never succeeds, and it's just, it frustrates you and you read it and it makes you angry and it makes you sad. This book is also incomplete, but it struggles about the general nature of existing within this world. It just ends on her, but what she said, and that's it. But even in its incomplete version, I think it's one of the most important works of the 20th century. I wanted to do it like a mix of like fiction and non-fiction. And then the last book is my recent most favorite read, and I've talked about it so much already. It's my one and only, it's my love, and it's Why Nations Fail. How it shaped me is, I think it just pretty much shaped my entire third year of university because I was studying development economics, and I swear by this book. It just gave me so much interest in development economics and the issues that we face socially, and how poverty in certain nations prevails and how the first world is dealing with it. The system of the political and economic order is actually what makes poor countries poor and wealthy countries wealthy, and that it can be turned around with enough opposition. If you've not read it, I've raved about it a million times, so I'm pretty sure that all of my subscribers have already read it, but definitely pick it up. I absolutely love it. That is it for the video, and I really hope you guys enjoyed this. And if you want to hear me talk about more books, then definitely comment down below. And I also want to challenge myself for 2018 to read a lot more. I used to read like 20 books a year when I was about 15 or 14, so I can barely remember what I've read because I've read so much. But recently it's really gone downhill because there's just so many other things you have to focus on all the time that reading just kind of isn't the priority anymore. But I wanted to make it a priority again, so challenge yourself to read more, and I will challenge myself to read more again. And I love all of you, and I will see you all in my next video. Goodbye.
There she go. Oh, oh, ooh.